One person wishes me good morning. Thank you. How about Happy New Year? All right, we'll roll with that. All right, so glad to see you all here this morning. I'm kind of at the tail end, a little head cold or something myself. Unfortunately, it seems like Nate is at the front end of something similar. Yeah, so we're obviously. Well, I'll tell you what. The few tests I took says it's not COVID, but whatever it is, none of y'all want it. So we'll keep some airspace here. But yeah, so obviously we're going to get to the rest of Nate's content in a different form a little bit later. But we got some amazing stuff this morning from Shannon, of course, as well. So I'm glad you're all here. I think we'll have some good discussion and whatnot as well. So thanks for being out here. We're going to jump right in, assuming I'm close enough for the remote. There we go. All right. So as always, we want to thank our awesome partners with Motto and Title Alliance. They also provided breakfast for us this morning. So thank you all. Appreciate that. And Brian, if you want to come up, I know you have some information out here for everyone.
Blake's going to be handing out what we call our realtor cheat sheet. And what it is, it summarizes the different loan programs and the maximum loan amounts. So the maximum loan amount this year went up to 667.2, and the FHA amount went up to 426.80. So now a lot of the FHA home buyers will be able to participate in the home purchasing because the loan amounts finally gotten up there. So on the front side, it shows the maximum loan amounts for different purchases: the primary, second home, and your rental home. Minimum down payment requirements. This is kind of a general guide. So there's some exceptions to this, but this gives you a good idea of what the general rules are. And that also goes to, which isn't very popular right now, seller concessions, the maximum seller concessions that you can have on each loan program. And then the gifting rules for each loan program. On the reverse side, what we have is waiting periods if you had bankruptcies, foreclosures, that sort of thing. And under each loan program, conventional, FHA, and VA. And then what the flipping rules are, and then the cosigner or non-occupant co-borrower rules are for each program too. But if you ever have any questions, absolutely give us a call. We'll be glad to go through the scenario with you to see what loan program and loan amount and everything that your client can qualify for. But any questions now? Oh, and interest rates. Not only has the conforming loan limit gone up, but interest rates are starting to creep up too. The 30-year fixed rate now is about 3.375, and the 15-year is about 2.5 to 2 5/8. The government rates are probably around, I didn't look them up this morning, but they're around 3%. They're still significantly lower than the conventional rates. So any questions? Jim? Yeah, actually there is no loan limit on VA. The question was, what's the loan limit on VA loans? The VA has no limit on the loans. The lenders generally do, though. They go up to about 1.5 million, and there'll be a little bit of a down payment by the vet, but still a lot better than the conventional program. And no mortgage insurance, it's probably about 11%, as I recall, over the 647.2. That is 100% financing, but they can go up to 1.5 million with a small down payment. To get a conventional, the question was, is a foreclosure like on a conventional loan? It's just any type of loan, they'd have to wait under the conventional loan program 7 years. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Now, I think it's a really cool cheat sheet there. So for those of you that are not here physically with us today, we can see about shooting you over a digital version of this. And again, they've got a bunch more if you want to have one handy in your workspace. So you can grab one from either of them at Motto as well. All right. Thankfully, we're at least, some of us here together today. So I wanted to say welcome aboard to some of our folks that have more recently joined us. So Diana is back. Juan Collado, joining the rest of the Collado team down there at Avondale, Julie Fuller, Bob Coakley, joining us from another franchise over in California, and Chris Henderson joining Barb and Dave. So, thanks for being with us. Welcome aboard. And again, we always like to start with some positivity and whatnot here, especially in a new year. We want to get that off to a good start. So in particular, a few that jumped out as far as reviews from some of your peers. I'll highlight a few of those here. There we go. This is for Nate Martinez. Nate was professional and prompt to introduce himself at the beginning of the transaction. He and his team maintained a good, a good presence throughout the process. Happy to work with them again in the future. That's a good thing. Jim Kuttner. Jim and his team were easy to work with, great and effective communication. We would love to do business again in the future. Yeah. All right, Colleen Begwin. The transaction was great! Exclamation point. It's always good when the exclamation point follows that kind of comment. We've seen exclamations after other stuff, right? She was easy to contact and fast to respond. Yay, when needed. She also had an assistant that was easy to work with and also contact. I would love to work with her again. Seeing a theme there, that's good stuff. Kyle Clayton. Kyle was great to work with. On top of everything, great communication and a smooth transaction. And then this one just kind of caught my eye. It's short and sweet and also anonymous. Thank you, Jeff, ellipsis. We did it! Exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. So it seems like there might be more to that one for 3 exclamation points and just we did it. But in any case, that's positive stuff. Love seeing that. So, keep being kind to each other out there. We all know we've got enough other challenges to deal with without introducing anything else to the transactions that can sometimes be challenging themselves. So always love to see this stuff. And of course, that positivity, that kindness, and all of that, it keeps translating into great market performance. So this is just a quick snapshot of November here versus our local competitors in the area. I'm not going to go into detail here. You've seen this pretty much every month, but I still like to highlight it, especially when there's uncertainty with the market or if we're feeling like it's slow or whatever. It's nice to compare kind of apples to apples here. So if you can't read this from further back here, that red line right there is REMAX professionals transactions per agent. The second line is the aggregate of all REMAX here in the Phoenix metro area. And then everyone else kind of tails on down from there. So again, great job. As always, you guys are remaining at the top of that. So keep up that excellent work. All right. So again, more positivity and also making a difference out there. As you all know, Children's Miracle Network, very near and dear to many of our hearts. It's one of our big charity recipients, community recipients for things that we do. So I think it was yesterday, we actually got an email that says, congratulations, your office has hit miracle status. And you guys are aware of the date, right? It was January 5th. So miracle status is based on total amount of contributions during a calendar year, right? So yeah, 5 days. Now, to be entirely fair, some of that was, kind of holdovers in December that closed a little bit later, whatever. But still, the point I'm making here is that, again, y'all go above and beyond for all of these wonderful things that are out there. And love seeing it. And that was just such a nice surprise to see that already. So keep up what you're doing there. We've got a lot more going on with a variety of things this year, but that was a great thing to see. On that topic, how many of you here use CMN honor cards for your clients? Like Miracle Home closings? Yeah, okay. So FYI, CMN has changed the way they actually handle a lot of that process, primarily on the back end, but a little bit of how you put it in. As y'all hopefully know, on your commission distribution sheet down at the bottom, if you want to send one, you just check that box and we handle that for you. You can continue to do that for the time being, but because of the changes they've made, there's basically just going to be some delay while they're working out exactly how that goes. So just be aware that they're not going to be going out immediately. It might be a week or two before those are back in play again. If there are bigger changes with that, we have to change the way we're actually putting those in or sending them out. We'll, of course, let you know. I just wanted to make you guys aware of that. And again, on the topic of community outreach and all that, something that we wanted to put a little bit more focus on this year is, again, what all of you do out in that community year round, right? We just came through that winter holiday season. And of course, there's a lot of things going on there. And there's always food drives around Thanksgiving and all that. But again, one of the things I truly love about professionals is what I see and hear from all of you. like, in the middle of March, right? Or whenever. You guys are always out there doing things. And yeah, we absolutely highlight things like CMN and some of those others that, are Remax things or tend to get a little bit more publicity on their own already. What we really wanted to focus a little bit more on this year as well is, again, all those deeper things in the community that y'all are doing that not everyone may be aware of. So we're going to highlight some specific charities, causes, community events, things like that you're involved in. So we're going to be soliciting all of you for anything you might want to talk a little bit more about. And today we're going to have Roberta on up here. Here we go, to talk about Homeward Bound.
Thank you, and thank you, REMAX professionals, for all the community service that you support and bring to our office. I actually support 3 different organizations. Homeward Bound is the one I want to speak about today because they're very similar to us. They're trying to find housing for people. And in the last month, many of you were very generous in donating to our resource drive. As Mike said, there are so many organizations that ask for and that we give food, clothing, toys, all of these types of things. And when I was talking to Homeward Bound, they commented, what we don't get is deodorant, toothbrushes, soap, shampoo. And so I've had baskets in the Surprise office and the Arrowhead North office where we've been collecting those items. And I just appreciate everybody donating. So Homeward Bound is an organization that their tagline is creating pathways out of poverty. I've met some of the people they've helped. There are usually about 3,000 applicants a year to try to get into their program. It's a year-long program. There's an apartment complex they bought several years ago, and the people who are accepted into the program get to stay there at the apartment complex. Their brains are retrained, literally retrained, how to get out of poverty, how to shop, how to take care of your kids, get them to school, how to choose the right types of products, that look for a job, do all of these things. And in this last year, you'll see up here, they've been able to add in some additional programming, their youth programming, their workforce development. I've met people who've gone through their workforce development programs. One gal, she's now an executive at Wells Fargo. I mean, there's just such a connection to our real estate business. It's amazing. So the big thing, why is that big QR code up there? Well, tax time, people, tax time. Every year I give on the charitable tax credit. Arizona allows you to give money. It's a 1-for-1 tax credit. So depending on your liability, you can donate to multiple organizations. You can donate to foster children organizations and to schools and to entities that take care of the impoverished. So you're not limited to one or the other. If you, in this case, donate $800 for a couple, that's a 1-to-1 tax credit. So if you have a tax liability of $1,000, you've just directed your money to helping this organization. So and it reduces your tax liability. So if you use that QR code, or I have handouts you're welcome to take with you, you just go straight to their page and do the tax credit. It's not too late. You can actually do it up until April 17th this year and still get your $800 tax credit towards your liability. It's an amazing organization. If you want to hear more about it, I'm happy to share more about them, get you a tour. I mean, truly an exceptional organization that I want to help grow in our community to help more people. I'll point out real quick, it was an interesting statistic. I was talking to the gal from Homeward Bound this morning. That bottom statistic there are only 24 homes available right now for every 100 families that need homes, that are looking for affordable housing. We know that because our market's insane right now. So we know that, but that's how it's impacting the homeless. So this is a place where we can help. Thank you so much.
So I think that's a great example of the kind of stuff we're talking about that we want to highlight a little bit more this year, especially with things like this related to, housing, those kind of things, obviously, directly relevant to us as well. So again, if any of you watching or here have something like this that you'd like to put out there in a little bigger way as well, please just reach out to any of us and we'll put you in the queue. Also, we know we've probably got more than 12 that we want to look at throughout the year. But again, we're going to be putting out those in other ways as well. So please reach out. We'd be happy to feature more of that and just, increase our activism in the community just that much more. All right. So another thing that we wanted to make sure you're very aware of, there's been a few things that have come out on this already, but this class coming up next Thursday, Protect Your Commission in 2022. So with, a lot of the transparency rules, things like that have come out. We've already seen, some changes here and there with the way commissions are being discussed. And really the idea here is to talk about what we've always talked about, right? Which is value. So as people are seeing a few more of those things more directly, they're starting to ask different questions, those kind of things. I know I don't have to go into any detail here. You've seen it, you've heard it, you live it. But we've got a great panel with Karen McGuire, Chris Zabricki, of course, Shannon, and moderated by Sarah. So this is going to be really interesting. A lot of deep information on, how to do these things, how to do them the right way. So I just can't encourage you enough to be there. Shannon, anything you want to add on that? Oh, grab your mic.
You hear me now?
This is going to be a big part of our future. Buyer broker agreements are going to become something that are absolutely necessary, just like a listing agreement when you're working with a seller. And I just really encourage you guys to take this seriously. I'm seeing a lot of things and reading a lot of the litigation and the legislation that's being proposed. And this is going to be your future. You need to pay attention to it now and be better at it than everybody else in order to stay competitive. So I just want to encourage you to come to this if you can and hear about all the tips and tricks for using a buyer broker and how to get those on a regular basis. So I just hope you'll be there.
Absolutely. All right. And then just one other item here before we jump into our main event. Oh, yeah. I think we're doing that one hybrid. Well, okay. Yeah. Kim confirms we'll have a link for that. Yes. Yeah. All right. So R4 Las Vegas coming up fairly soon now. Who all is registered and going? That's a pretty good number of hands. I like that. I'd love to see more hands, but this is good. All right. Good stuff. So again, typically this is also where I throw to Nate or someone and be like, okay, how many have you been to? How good is it? You should be there. I'm not going to try to reconvince you at this point, but it's very much worth it. And I just wanted to remind you that registration is still open. If you haven't already purchased your registration, because you are part of a premier brokerage with REMAX, you do get a $100 discount. So the prices you see on there are going to be $100 less when you actually log out because they know you're affiliated with us. So just FYI, if you were on the fence or something. The other thing, of course, is hopefully, other than the folks that have joined us in the last week or so here, you've seen plenty of information on the passport to R4. I'm just going to say a couple words about this again, because, yeah, I get it. Sometimes you're like, meh, yeah, boy, that looks like fun, right? Okay, the whole idea here is that we just really want to encourage folks to take a look at especially some of the tools, the services, the resources that REMAX has that may not be something that you typically touch, right? Again, a lot of us have marketing plans that are already rolling along, working well for us. So, if it ain't fixed, don't break it. Don't break it. Don't broke it. So yeah, I understand that too. But what can you add in? What else can you experience? And also, especially coming through Q4 there, a lot of us kind of take our foot off the gas a little bit, which is fine. We need that family time, that sort of thing. But the idea here too is a lot of the things on this list are things that are extremely easy for you to do and kind of Ron Popeil it, right? I think I'm in the right generation here. You set it and forget it, right? So, again, just to encourage you to see some of that and do things that are going to actually benefit your business as you move forward here. So, it's not just a game, really, it's to encourage those kind of things as well. And there's some pretty interesting things on here. So a number of folks have already completed that. Anyone who hasn't, I know we originally said through the end of the year, but we're rolling this on through January. We're going to do a drawing for a registration to R4 for the folks that have already completed now. And of course, they're going to remain in that pool. And anyone else who completes at least 6 of these gets 1 entry in the hat. If you complete all 12, you get 2 entries. If you haven't taken a look at this, if you kind of just clicked right on by that email, please do take a look. Honestly, a lot of you may have already done some of these. Show us an example of that. And you know what? There's an ulterior motive too. If you, for instance, share your business plan that maybe you didn't talk to us about before, we're going to look at it. And if we can support you in any of that, we're going to do that, you know? So again, just really encouraging all that. So with that said, our first winner, Monica. So those of you that weren't here in the room, there's an audible gasp. So that was good. Thank you for the reaction there, Monica. Were you already registered or no? Okay, so we can get you like a credit for that. We'll handle all that. Of course, Kim's on top of it, so she'll take care of it. So we're just going to do that one today because, again, I really want more of you guys to jump in, do some of those other things, have a little bit of fun here, and also enhance your businesses and hopefully get some more out of this. So we're going to give away additional registrations. We're going to do some fun night stuff, probably a few other things thrown into the pot there, maybe from some of our amazing partners and friends with some of our other vendors we work with, that sort of thing. So we're going to do more with this. I'm going to encourage you to do that. But that's all I'm going to say about it now. And congrats, Monica. Woo! All right. And we're going to move on to the main event here. So I'm going to hand this on over to Shannon. Lots of great information here. Looking forward to a lot of great discussion as well. Those of you that are joining us online, if you put in anything into the comments, the chat there, we're monitoring that as well. So we'll make sure we can ask some of those questions here as well, live.
Gone. All right. So we'll be honest here. Nate's a little under the weather, and so we had to pivot very quickly yesterday because he was going to be doing his presentation, and I'm seeing Jody's not here. So here we go. I'm on my own. We'll see how this goes.
She is a wealth of information. It'll be good.
I mean, I do have a lot to talk about, but I was hoping to have a little support, but that's okay. Do you want to go next slide into the names? Okay, so something I've talked about a lot, you guys, is names. And I feel like a broken record. I've said this a million times, but the names are critical. And there are so many transactions that we're seeing that are not signed properly or have the owner's name on the contract properly. And that becomes an unenforceable contract, you guys. That's really critical that you get that right and that you're checking those deeds. And if Jody were here, I know she would like to pipe in and say, don't trust Monsoon all the time. Don't just take that name off the top of that tax record. Go to the deeds. Even better, go to the county and look up those deeds and see who's on title. Because you'd be surprised how many people will pop up that you maybe don't realize or weren't aware of how they took title. An unfortunate side piece to our world right now is there have been a lot of people pass away. There have been a lot of deaths, and unfortunately, in the last couple of years, and with trusts and all these different things, there are family members who are coming out of the woodwork who might have been on property, that kind of thing, or had rights to it, or those kind of things. And I'm getting those challenges hit my desk when we're in escrow and everybody figures it out, and then there's going to be a delay to go through probate or whatever the situation is. And all of a sudden that creates issues for maybe the person who was moving on to another property in another transaction, and you get the idea. So just really pay attention to that. And if you're not sure, go to your title company first, have them check on the property first to make sure you've got the right people signing and signing properly. So this document is that signature blocks page that we have for reference for you guys in Working Docs of SkySlope. And if someone has a trust or a personal representative or they're an LLC, these are the way they need to sign and how it needs to show for ownership on the contract. I know one of the challenges is space with the autofill and the technology side of the contracts. So what you need to know is that the owner and seller or buyer name needs to be the name of the actual entity or trust or whatever it is. And then the signature is just whoever is allowed to sign for that as trustee, as personal rep, as manager member, whatever they are. So you have to change that signature block. Does that make sense? And that's where we see a lot of the challenges because you autofill it, you put it in and autofill it, and it's not coming out and being signed properly when it's going through those electronic signatures. So just be careful of that. This is for reference for you guys. Jody also. And I'm going to be emailing these to you guys in the broker blast this week. So you have these in your email. You can save them somewhere. But this one talks about what you should do if there's a power of attorney to confirm that power of attorney works for the property. We ran into a transaction recently where the seller had a power of attorney recorded, or I think it was a power of attorney recorded in another state. It wasn't valid in Arizona, was what was discovered during escrow. So those kind of things are the things you want to have checked by title ahead of time, so you're not dealing with it at the last minute and having issues. But this kind of gives you what happens if it's a power of attorney, a trust. I think on the next page is the business entities, LLCs, that sort of thing, and how to handle those. So I just thought this was a really nice reference piece, and I appreciated Jody providing it. Did you have a question, Jim? Okay. Potentially. So what I've heard, and I thank goodness we haven't actually seen this, but what I'm hearing is happening is, we're in a competitive market and people start looking for loopholes when they want to change their mind on something. And what they're doing is they're going to an attorney to look for those loopholes, and that's what they're finding. And then they're saying, you don't even have a contract. Don't worry about it. Walk away. And there's not a whole lot from what I'm hearing they can do. So right. Oh, gotcha. So the question Jim just had was that if we're on the opposite side, so maybe we're representing buyer, but seller has a trust or an LLC, or should we be asking for those documents? I don't necessarily think so, but I would maybe confirm with title just to get a, hey, do you have what you need? Are we good? Does anybody else need to sign that? Just confirm with them, maybe might be the way to go, to have them double check and watch those title reports real closely and make sure that when you're getting those, that if anything pops up that's different, that's being addressed as needed as well. But that's a tough one because one of them that we ran into was on the seller side and we were on the buy side. And it created it was a huge issue because they had sold their house. The buyer had nowhere to go. Seller needed another 3 weeks to deal with the legal issue of getting it cleaned up. And you can see where those challenges come up. So, yeah. And then if there's a deceased owner, if one party is deceased and again, how they hold title is very important, whether it's community property, all these different ways. It's really critical that even if you don't know all the nuances of these things, that you confirm with title so that they confirm who needs to be signing and how and what documents are needed. Does that make sense? I wish Jody was here because I think she'd probably have a lot more input on some of this, but I just wanted to share this. I thought this was a great reference piece. I'm old, kids. I need paper. A couple of random things before we go into this homestead portion of this. COVID. Unfortunately, we're all seeing the little spike we're going through, and I've already had, I believe, 3 calls this week where COVID is affecting a transaction, whether it be because they can't get in for showings or inspections or closing delay because someone is quarantined. So I would just encourage you that you might want to think about the COVID addendum again, or at least be having those conversations again, reminding clients what could happen if someone gets quarantined and addressing that up front. So not everybody is upset at the end when they can't close on time because they can't get in and do a walkthrough or whatever the situation is, or someone can't sign because they're quarantined, that sort of thing. So just as a reminder, it's an unfortunate reality that hopefully this passes quickly, this little spike we're having. But for now, you might want to readdress that with your clients. And appraisals. I'm seeing a lot of appraisals come in low. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that, but I've gotten several calls in the last 2 weeks for that. And large amounts, a $500,000 house. And we've seen 3 of them that were between 70 and 90 low. So you're not talking $1 million house where that, relative amounts, that sort of thing. So just something to be aware of. Think something to consider on that. We've had a situation recently where, hopefully Nate's okay with me sharing this on his team, but they had a transaction where the appraisal came in low. Buyer had waived their appraisal contingency and then determined that they still didn't want to move forward because they'd rather lose the $10,000 earnest money than they would the $60,000 of equity, kind of a thing. So something to consider with the market we're in. I can see that becoming more of an issue here lately. So, and then the last thing is going to Homestead, is working in your area of expertise. I get a lot of requests for doing a transaction in Pine, or I just want to buy this, my friend wants to buy this one place. Can I help them in out of area, Prescott, Flagstaff, all the places everybody's trying to buy second properties or VRBO properties, that sort of thing. And I'm just going to share with you, I don't want to be difficult about this, but I get way too many transactions that become a challenge because someone doesn't know the nuances of that market. They don't know the comps. They don't know the neighborhoods. They don't know how the utilities run. They don't understand certain things about those areas that become critical, and it becomes a challenge. Commercial, we get a lot of people that want to sell it's just a piece of land. Well, there is a lot that goes into that on the commercial side. There's a lot of different inspections and environmental and all these other things and zoning and what they can build and not. And if you are not intimately familiar with that, just give it to someone who is. We've got Roberta, we've got Tom Witt doing commercial, we've got, people in Flagstaff, we've got people in Prescott. So if you need those areas, we likely have someone, and I would just really, really encourage you to let someone else handle that. It's just not worth it. Stay in your lane, what you know, and be good at what you do in that area. So that's just my little speech on that. So homestead exemptions. So is everybody aware that this changed January 1st? Everybody knows the gist. So I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to say I stole it, but I'm going to use this presentation because it has some really great examples. And I felt Jody provided this when we were kind of talking about this part from the title side. And I just thought it has the best examples to break it down for you that might help.
And as you can see, there's very clear attribution there. Thank you,
Yes.
Gust and Rosenfeld.
Yes, thank you, Mike. So we're going to go through this really quick. I'm going to use their presentation just because I think it's just the best, and they did a great job of summarizing this. So we're going to go through why the change, highlights, scenarios, notice requirements, priorities, and questions. We can probably go through these pretty quick. In 2018, what started this conversation or why this legislation changed, it stemmed from a lawsuit where there was a recorded judgment. It didn't get paid, or it didn't get paid. It was missed. And the judgment creditor then came back and tried to judicially foreclose on the new owner. So that's what caused this. So as you know, in the historical side of this, the law basically says that no lien or judgment shall be claimed against a homesteaded property. Keep in mind, I want to clarify because we just talked about names. The statute that talks about homestead exemptions is for a person. It doesn't say entity, meaning a trust, an LLC. They don't have homestead exemption. Those properties all of a sudden lose that unless you're an actual person. So keep that in mind when you're moving forward and looking at some of these and whether something like this applies, because that exemption goes away if it's an entity or a trust or they have ownership in a different way. So just as a side note. This is just background. The biggest change January 1st is that the homestead exemption increased. Two biggest things. Increased to $250 from $150, which is good. A little more protection, especially with our prices increasing. And then that a judgment lien can now be attached to the property, to real property. So that's big. So, we had a situation about a month and a half ago where a seller had co-signed for a family member on student loans, and they had defaulted, and it became a $30,000 judgment against them. And all of a sudden it shows up. They weren't, they had enough equity that homestead didn't apply in that case. So they had to pay that. It was a surprise to them. So those kind of things do happen. Credit card judgments, these kind of things that they come up more than you realize. So now that they're going to be attached to properties, it's something you need to be having that conversation with your sellers right up front in your listings and saying, is there any judgment potentially that's coming up, or have title look for that kind of thing. So because it's going to be more in the conversation. It also affects refinances. So basically means that for no cash out refinance, title company may record a subordination of judgment lien, and for judgment debtor may not receive any refinance cash until that's satisfied. So it's paid if they're doing a cash out. So a couple scenarios, because there is one little nuance in this that says there's this kind of 80% rule. So it's all based on the equity in the property is what the seller has. So for these examples, for the 80%, if they have 80% of the 250, so if they have equity between 200 and 250,000, the title company, if a judgment comes up, has to send that creditor a notice. And I believe they have, I don't know if it's on here, but I believe it's 20 days or 21 days to get that back. So again, something to be aware of is if that's going to be a factor, you need to factor that into your close dates and make sure there's enough time to get those notices properly filed and get them back in that amount of time. So you're not delaying closing. Can you back up one more? Sorry. So if you can see the example, and this is the part I felt like it kind of hammered home how this is going to work. If the sales price of the home is $400,000, the deed of trust, so their mortgage is over $200,000, they have $170,000 in equity after their reasonable closing costs and real estate agent fees. They have $170,000 in equity. It's, where am I at? Less than $2,200, $250,000. So they do not have to pay that judgment because it's protected. Again, if it's a person, it's protected. And then, right? Thank you. If it's between 200 and 250, this is where that same scenario, now they have to send, it is 20 days. They have to send, that title company has to send that notice, and then they have the right to the judgment creditor to either release it or say no, in which case then the seller or the debtor can contest that, but they'd have to do it through a lawsuit to clear that lien. Does that make sense? And I'll go over some thoughts and questions because I've got a bunch. Scenario 3 is if they have more than $250,000 in equity, that judgment lien has to be paid, is the short version. So no matter what, and it attaches. In this case, the difference was what happens if the judgment lien takes that equity less than the 250. Doesn't matter. If the original equity minus reasonable costs and fees is 250 or plus, then that judgment lien has to be paid regardless. Does that make sense? Refinance, we talked a little bit about this. Same rules apply essentially, just depending on if they're taking cash out or not, if that matters. This is if they take the cash out. Is everybody seeing this okay? And following? And again, if they're taking that cash out and they have more than the 200. No, 250. This is for the notices. There's a lot of, so the notices, we actually have copies from title. We got those just to kind of see how they were going to do it. But it's basically all this information that they have to fill out. It has to be included properly, sent out to that judgment creditor, and then getting that back. All the requirements. Yes. Because this is all just the nuances and the details of this. So this is how it will work for those, because we're kind of in that, this law just went into effect, or the change just went into effect. So for anything recorded prior to, so December 31st of 21 and back, will not have, the new law will not apply, but anything recorded January 1 forward will. So for any of your closings. And just the thank you. So a couple things that I have thought about, or questions that I've had, is that the reasonable fees and the agent costs, when you're determining that equity, I'm not entirely clear what that means. I know that what in my mind that means is that if you have a seller that you're trying to reduce their equity position so that they don't have, for example, if you were trying to be sneaky, and you're trying to reduce that position so that they don't have to pay a judgment lien, if you typically charge X for your agent fee, and this time you're charging XYZ and every other letter of the alphabet on top of that, that's going to be a red flag. And if it's questioned, you're going to have to show, why was this transaction different than the other 30 you did? And why did you charge differently? So reasonable means being consistent, being what you would normally do for any other client, that sort of thing. Reasonable title fees, those kind of things. You can't puff those numbers, if you will. And if it's questioned, again, you're going to have to show, why is that number different than what's normal or what you've done for the last however many transactions, if that makes sense. Because I can see that where people are going to try to play things. That's the way, they try to get out of having to pay these kind of things. But again, some of those kind of pieces are kind of yet to be seen. This is so new that we're going to see how this goes. Now, Jody explained to me that their legal counsel, ironically, the timing of this didn't quite line up, but they're actually meeting at 10 o'clock today, which might be why she's not here, to do training for all the title side on this. The next month, her legal counsel is going to be in town, has offered to teach us a class and go even deeper on all of this stuff. So I would encourage you guys, if you have questions about that, and my disclaimer is, I don't know that we know everything yet and we entirely understand all of this, but I wanted to give you an overview so that you can be having that conversation with your seller right up front as you're on listing appointments to see if any of this even potentially applies, given the scenarios. Does that make sense? And anybody have questions on any of that? Right. Do you agree? I don't know if anybody's taken anything else. Go ahead. Do you guys agree, though, that I felt like that presentation, just because the way they laid it out, I thought was really helpful. In my mind, it just helped clarify some of the pieces I wasn't entirely sure about. So we'll make sure everybody gets a copy of that because I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, and when we were chatting before, I think what at least I've noticed about this is if you spend a little time actually looking at those bullet points, and then suddenly your brain applies it to something that you had last year, and then all of a sudden it's very real, right? And you go a little bit deeper. So as Shannon mentioned, that stuff will be shared out as well with the Broker Blast stuff tomorrow. So take a look and actually, read through those bullet points. And if you do have a specific scenario, specific questions, all that, please make sure you share those through. And as Shannon mentioned, we will be going deeper on this. It's going to, necessitate us going deeper on some of these things. But again, it's still kind of evolving with some of the, maybe not interpretation, but again, the scenarios that are showing up and whether or not they actually apply, that sort of stuff. So, it's still pretty new. It's been in effect 5 days here, but right. Yeah.
And the rumors I'm hearing in some of the meetings I've been in, with other brokers and other folks, is that this is likely not the final version of these changes, that there are some parts that are a little bit too vague and that they're going to be redefining those things in upcoming legislative sessions this year. So we may see a change to this next year, kind of a thing, or maybe more defined pieces of it next year is what I'm hearing, because there's a lot of questions that have come out of it already. One other thing, can I just mention one more thing?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm on a soapbox. On the names and things, I know everybody gets frustrated with us when we're reviewing files and we're making notes that these initials were missed or that a correction needs to be made and everybody needs to initial those changes. I want you to kind of put it in perspective, though, of think about if you've ever bought a house yourself or signed for something with a title company or a lender. How careful are they? If you miss an initial or you don't sign properly, they make you redo it. They don't let that slide. They don't get to leave a blank. They don't get to have the wrong person sign. They're incredibly careful. If you've ever been through that process, I'm assuming you have. We should be equally as careful. And I hope that puts it in perspective of there's no reason we should be handling this as seriously as they do, because there's a reason they do, and we should be doing the same. So I want you to think about that when you've missed something or we're flagging it and we're being a pain about something like that. We're doing it for your protection because we unfortunately see the negative side of when those things are used as loopholes or someone tries to use it to get out of a situation or be difficult, because everything's fine until someone changes their mind or they have a challenge and then they're looking for those mistakes. So just be careful. Just be careful.
It's all fun and games until a missed initial kills the transaction. Is that what that saying is?
Right?
Something like that.
Exactly.
So I'm going to go off script here for a moment, just to say related to that. I talk with a lot of other agents out there in the market as well. Some people, prospective recruits, things like that. And we're talking about challenges and that kind of thing. And I'll tell you what, as much as it could be sometimes frustrating, to get that notice that comes back from Skyslope from Kimberly or Shannon here. I can tell you that the legally required broker review at a lot of places essentially consists of, does the paperwork exist? Oh, it does? Good. Stamped. And then you run into those challenges later. And that's when it's truly painful. So, I mean, just a huge kudos to the fact that, if you're not aware by now, like, these ladies actually look at everything that's in the contract. When you've added additional terms, they read the additional terms. And sometimes it's a question of, hey, in Shannon's mind, she's thinking back 12 years to when that same language was used and the intent was this, but the other parties took it as this. That's where some of those questions come from. And the other, kudos I want to give to Shannon here is that, as much as, we do have to be sticklers about some very specific items that are just purely black and white, what I really appreciate is, again, all that breadth of knowledge, working with all of you folks as well, and actually working together through these things, has given her some pretty incredible risk management chops to look at something and say, how much do we actually need to push an issue, right? And occasionally she is able, to find a separate solution for you guys. Like, if you're having a real hard problem with the parties on the other side finishing something you need or whatever, she actually has that knowledge to help you all decide together as well, like, hey, does this really need to be an issue, or can we do something different here? So again, you're a little slack if you think, geez, if you find yourself rolling your eyes or whatever, there's probably a lot more to it. And if you're not sure, she's always happy to chat. So kudos to you, Shannon. We appreciate that.
Thank you. Any questions anybody has on any of that, or anything you're seeing out there that I can help with, since we've got a few more minutes here? Oh, yes. So the question was, as a broker, do we have access to legal counsel without a fee? We do. AAR provides, they call it the legal hotline. So we're able to call them in situations. I typically will reach out to them for very kind of basic questions, or just interpretation of a contract, because they are probably the ones that were on the committee that wrote the contract, most of them. So they have really good insight as to the intention behind some of the language in the contracts or the addendums and those kind of things. If it goes any deeper or a little bit different, we do have a legal, we have an attorney that helps us otherwise, that I go to depending on the situation. So yes, we do. Oscar? Yes. We want to try to back up to that one, and I'll try to find my sheet here. Basically, if it's determined that their equity is going to be between 200 and 250, and there's a judgment lien recorded, right? Regardless of the judgment lien amount, if their equity after paying the first mortgage or whatever it is, and then their reasonable fees to close is between that 2 and 250, the title company then has to send that judgment creditor a notice and allow the judgment creditor to either release it. If they don't respond within the timeframes that are required, then the title company can go ahead and close without paying it. If they come back and say no, it needs to be paid, then which, assuming yes, they do respond. If they do that properly, then at that point it either has to be paid or the seller would need to contest it through legal proceedings, is my understanding. Cindy? That's okay. I believe it's when it's their primary residence as a person. So I'd have to look up and see. Yes. If you are a person that owns it and it's your primary residence, yes, in Arizona. Right. Yeah. So for those online,
yeah,
I was just
our
gonna
very
say,
seasoned professionals here are reminding us of
experienced are reminding
that's absolutely a very genuine compliment. Okay.
yes, that from what we remember, that you had to file for that homestead exemption. It wasn't just automatic. I'll confirm that with Jody or with title and somebody and just make sure if that's changed or not, because I do remember that, but I don't remember if that's changed over the years. Right. And I think for most people that have that equity of 250 or less, really not going to come into play a whole lot, or even 200 or less, let's say. I foresee that because our values have gone up and people have a better equity position right now, that this potentially could be more of an issue here now with this change. Now that those are automatically attached, essentially, if they're recorded against the owner. So.
Thank you to Cindy for saying what needed to be said.
Right. Right.
Kim, you had a question online?
And yes. And they already see that online, I'm assuming. So yes, yes, you can do an amendment or you can change it on the contract and have everybody initial those changes, just like anything. And, I know a lot of that comes up a lot with what has to be reinitialed by both parties. If there's a change to a contract, say you miss a box for the home warranty or for lead paint or something like that, and it's a change to the terms, both parties have to initial that change anytime you're changing it, because you just can't amend a contract arbitrarily. If it's where a seller just missed page 4 initialing the bottom, not necessarily. That's just them re-acknowledging what they already had signed at the end or the other pages. So if that makes sense, it's more if it's a change in terms that affects both parties, that has to be addressed by both and initialed by both. That makes sense. Danielle? Yep. Yeah. I do think that's probably fine. Yeah. Because it is corrected before it's executed. Yeah. I think so. I'll think about that. Make sure there's, I don't think that affects. It is. Right. I think that's fine because you're doing that. You're inputting that information on behalf of your client and indicating their representation. That's just, I think that's fine. I'm thinking through it as we're talking. Any other questions, you guys? Anything online more, Kim? Nope. Everybody good? All right. I don't know if I have an opinion one way or another. The question was whether or not how I feel about the change in the homestead exemption. I don't know if I have an opinion one way or another. I just think for us, it's going to come into play more. I think that's my only opinion, potentially, because the equity position is different, because people are holding title different than they used to. I mean, I think in my experience, back in the day, we rarely saw, trusts were typically in your retirement communities or adult communities, that sort of thing was where you saw that more often. and they bought it cash, those kind of things. All of this is changing because the way people are holding title, the way the equity position is, all of that's different, and I think going to affect us a lot more in the future because of that. And keep in mind, I mean, Cindy can attest to this, but things like where the names and those kind of things come into play also is that we had a situation recently, and I don't remember whose it was, but where mom and dad passed away, the kids were the successor trustees, and as they were selling the property, I think I see who it was. As they were selling the property, the HOA charged them that transfer fee and then charged it again to the buyer that way. And it was a big fee. And some of those are $3,000-$4,000. Yeah. And so just that change. And I've heard arguments that, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I've heard arguments that's not a change in ownership. It's just a change in who's signing for the same owner. But I don't know. And they still try to do it. And I've heard you have to send pretty demanding letters to get those kind of things cleaned up so that you're not getting charged that. Things like, and I've never seen this happen, but an owner changes, they own it, they buy the property in their personal, and then they go put it in a trust. That is a change in ownership. And if they have a mortgage, a lot of times that note has terms in it that says that if there's a change in ownership, that they have the right to call it due and payable, like an acceleration clause there. So those kind of things can come into effect. I haven't ever seen that happen, but again, just something to be aware of if you have clients considering those kind of things. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. So the comment for those online was that Cindy was explaining that in Westbrook Village, for example, they see if there is a transfer of ownership, say mom and dad are ill and they want to take care of this ahead of time and they transfer ownership to their, sons, daughters, whoever, to their heirs, then that triggers it. But if it's a transfer of ownership after they're deceased, they don't typically view that as a change. They don't trigger that. I think it depends on the community as what I'm hearing out there, and whether the community just tries to get someone to pay it, because some people may not question it and just do it, So I think that's part of it as well. Any other questions on any of that? We good? All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. It's a new year. Everybody feeling good about 2022? Yay. All right. Thanks, guys. Yeah, made it. Thank you, guys. Have a good month.